What is up, Pitt fans? Welcome to another edition of the PG Pitt Show brought to you by FanDuel. My name is Stephen Thompson. That's Abby Schnable. We both cover Pitt athletics for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm coming to you from a Petersen Events Center that is still getting cleaned up after the Panthers lost 70-54 to the number 4 team in the country, the Duke Blue Devils. Abby, an entertaining game for most of the night that kind of spiraled out of control from Pitt, but they hung with this team for the vast majority of the night. It was less than a 12-point margin. I'm sitting up here in the press box when Pitt goes up 9-4. They cap a 7-0 run with a big time dunk. No, I think it was Barry's dunk that forced Duke to call a timeout less than 3 minutes in. And just you feel the energy in this place, and you just remember what this place feels like when this team is good, right? When people are invested. And there were a lot of Duke fans here, but those first 3 minutes, man, those first 5 minutes, really, Pitt jumped out 12-6, I think. Roman Siulepa hit a couple threes. And again, you're just reminded of what this place is like, what this program is like when this team is good and playing in big games. It was kind of fun, I'll be honest with you. I know this season has been miserable, and I know this doesn't really change anything that they, held a lead against Duke, 5 minutes in, but I don't know what you want me to say. It was more fun than not tonight.
I think it is, notable, though, that they not only did they have the lead for just over 5 minutes in this game, they have had some awful losses this season to teams that were not as good as Duke. And yes, Duke was missing a big part of its team. However, it's just the fact that, they hung in there for all, but honestly, it was still a 10-point game with about 8-ish minutes left. It was never totally out of range until the end there. And that is a huge improvement from a team that, has lost games by 20, 30, 40 at this point. And for them to do it against, a team with the best player in the ACC on it, arguably, and for them to do it in ways that we haven't really seen from them. Their defense was fairly solid throughout. Their 3-point shooting felt like, it didn't come out of nowhere, but it's some of the better shot selection we've seen. And so it's all of these little things that we've been talking about that they needed to improve upon. And you saw it, at least for a half, you saw that. And to do it against a Duke team that is, really dominant, I think that's impressive, even though they lost.
Yeah, we'll get into, I guess, kind of a bigger picture question at the end of this, but, to talk about, to kind of bounce off of some of what you said, Pitt, I think, followed the formula for an upset really well in this game. 20 of their first 28 shots in the first half were from 3-point range, and they made 35% of them. Meanwhile, they were defending Duke really hard, and I think they were more opportunistic than really solid. Duke still shot 55% from the field in the first half. They dominated paint points, I believe it was 24-6. But 3-pointers can be the great equalizer. Turnovers can also be the great equalizer. I don't know how many Duke had in the first half.
5.
They had 5 in the first half. They averaged 11 for the game. They ended with 13. I thought Pitt did a lot of the things that they really needed to do. They followed the game plan really well. In order to be within range of victory, to compete with these guys. That they are less talented. They aren't as deep. They don't have the same amount of size. So they did all of the things that they needed to do, defending without fouling the way they did. I thought, at least, early, I'm not trying to give them too much credit for losing by 16, but executed a lot of the things that they needed to do in order to win this game.
Yeah, when you have a team that Pitt forces 13 turnovers on this, that's more than North Carolina on Saturday held against Duke. It's actually they're tied for their second most turnovers in an ACC game, and they've played a lot of good ACC teams. And it's no surprise to say that Pitt really isn't one of those great ACC teams. But the fact that they were able to do it, get 11 steals out of those, and, some of those were really making plays off the ball. Some of those were just sloppy mistakes from Duke. But you don't do that against the number 4 team in the nation if you're not, really, really hustling. And I hope I'm not jumping the gun to start talking about the defense with Cameron Boozer. But
no, go ahead.
Cameron Boozer averages 23 points a game, and he had 17. And yes, 17 is a big number. But when you hold him 6 below, and not only 6 below his average, but he averages about 14.5 attempts, and he only took 9 shots. That shows that Pitt was putting him into tricky situations, and a big credit, you got to give a big credit to Roman Siulepa, who was putting him in difficult scenarios. And the other thing about, Boozer's output is a majority of his points came in the last 5 minutes of each half. This is a guy who was mostly contained until Pitt. You could start to see the little fatigue from Pitt.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Roman because, he wasn't in single coverage all the time, but I thought his strength was really useful against a guy as strong as Boozer and has as wide a skill set. Roman's really growing. I think defense was the biggest thing that he struggled with early this season. It was foul trouble that was keeping him off the floor, not allowing him to really play to his fullest potential. And in this game, not only was he consistently matched up with the other team's best player, something that he's started to do a lot more often. He did it down at Virginia. SMU was a little different just because, they're so guard focused as opposed to a wing. But when the opposing team's best player is a wing, Roman Siulepa, or a big man, or, basically anything other than a center or a point guard, Roman Siulepa is the one guarding him. And he has grown so much defensively. And that was another big reason why Pitt was able to stay in this game. He also got some help from his teammates. We were told the plan going into this game was to double Cameron Boozer, take the ball out of his hands. And sometimes they forced him to pass. They forced him to pass probably more than I think Duke would have liked him to. But they also forced 4 turnovers. So I think they did a really excellent job as a team. But Roman Siulepa certainly deserves a ton of credit. He's grown tremendously, and that's before we get to he scored how many points?
19.
19 on 6 of 15. We can improve the free throw shooting still, but he was really, really good in this game. And if he can convert a few layups through some contact more consistently, we're talking about truly, I think, one of the better players in the ACC. He's really come along really strong when conference play started.
It's almost unfortunate that he probably won't make the all ACC freshman team just because of how stacked this freshman class is. Because he has had 2 I'll say off games these past couple of games where he hasn't gotten over double figures after having 3 straight double doubles, which is an impressive feat in and of itself. So to see him get back out there, and usually his bread and butter is rebounding. We see him get crazy rebounding numbers, and he didn't lead the team. But he made his impact elsewhere because, he was scoring 19 points. I mean, it was only 2 less than the next highest player, which was Isaiah Evans. And like he said, it's hard to contain Cameron Boozer. And he did that, not by himself, but he did that. I think another player that really stood out to me in today's game, though, was Barry Dunning Jr. dropping 17, 6 rebounds. This is a guy who's some of his worst ACC performances have been against, some of these ranked teams, Virginia, Clemson, there's one, Louisville. And so for him to, drop 17, really hit the 3 threes for him, and that's the most he's had in ACC play. It makes you sit there and wonder, like, man, if he could have played to this level and some other games, would they be different? Obviously, you can't play the hypothetical, but, looking down the line, if he can pull out these kind of numbers and continue to play with the intensity that he had today, I don't know. I'm not saying they're going to, all of a sudden make the ACC tournament go from last to first or anything, but especially with Brandin Cummings out, this is something that Pitt needed.
Yeah, I think Dunning was kind of the poster child for the offensive strategy, which was chuck a bunch of threes and try to make the most of your opportunities. He started slow. I think he missed maybe his first 2 or 3 shots from beyond the arc, but then he finally made one, and you could see the relief on his face. And then they just started to come in bunches. I thought he rebounded really well too, and I thought that was huge against Duke's front court, even as undermanned as they were. So, yeah, a good game from Barry Dunning. I think one that Pitt really needed. If he goes 7 for 14 and probably, I don't know, there are a handful of ACC games that they probably win if Barry goes 7 for 14 instead of, 2 for 7 like he did in some of those. So an encouraging game from him as well. But at the end of the day, Pitt shoots 2 for 13 from 3 in the second half. That kind of falls apart. Their defense also suffered a little bit in the second half as well. Duke started to pour on the threes themselves, making 7 of 14 in the second half. So ultimately, it's still a 16-point loss, and that's all it counts for. But Abby, I'm curious, are you encouraged by this game, or do you see it's maybe a little bit too late for moral victories? Because one of the things Jeff Capel also referenced during his post-game press conference was Pitt didn't finish super well at the rim, and his answer, I thought, to a question about it was kind of illustrative of where we are right now. He said, I hope we get better at finishing around the rim, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, but he said, we're probably not going to. It's February. We're 20 plus games into the season. You kind of are who you are now, and I hope we get better, but at finishing at the rim, but odds are we won't. So I guess that's my question is do you think that this is a sign of improvement? Do you think that this is something that this team can build on? Or was this just kind of the team getting juiced up for a big game at home against, the number 4 team in the country?
I'm not sure we're going to see this kind of performance consistently just because we have had games, especially in non-conference play, where we have seen them play really well, maybe not to the level or like against an opponent to Duke's level. But what I will say is I think it reinvigorated not only, maybe us as reporters just after how much of a slog it's been lately, but obviously, I mean, you could hear the fans on the broadcast, it hasn't been that way in a while. And you mentioned how loud it was at points there. And, it just, as much as it sucks to lose, it has to give these guys a moral victory. They hung in with Duke until the end. I mean, not to the end, but they kept it within 10, 12 points until it really got in those last couple minutes. And I just think that's something that I think Barry Dunning said it in the press conference. It's something that you can build off of and remember the feeling of what it was like to, have a lead against Duke, even though it was, 28-27 or 29-28 with like 3 minutes to go. That's still a lead over the 4th best team in the nation. So build off of it, sure. But ultimately, I think it's just, something exciting for the players and the fans, even though it was a loss.
Yeah, my thing is, I think that I don't think for most of this game that Pitt played well above its head. Like, I think they did things that are repeatable. Like, I think the defense is repeatable. Maybe they don't want to be taking, 20 of 28 of making 20 of 28 shots, from 3-point range in a given half. Maybe that's not a consistent formula to victory, but like I said, I think they can repeat the defense. I think they can repeat the ball movement. I think they can repeat the intensity. I think there are a lot of things to really like about this game. I doubt there was anyone out there who was expecting Pitt to even keep this a 16-point game, much less keep it as close as they did for most of the afternoon or most of the evening. And so I am, I don't know if encouraged is the right word, but I do think that there were some good things and a lot of positives to take from this. So hopefully they can take them down with them to Chapel Hill on Saturday afternoon. The Panthers got another ranked opponent on deck. The only team to beat the Blue Devils in ACC play was the North Carolina Tar Heels on Saturday night, and the Panthers draw them next. It's the end of this really tough stretch that we've been talking about of 5 games. Things get a little bit easier after that, but the other thing is Jeff Capel winning record against the Carolina Tar Heels during his tenure at Pitt, 6-5 in 11 games. So hopefully they can recapture some of that magic and pull an upset. Thank you all for tuning into this edition of the PG Pitt Show, brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing, and check out all of our written work at post-gazette.com. Got some football, some basketball coming the rest of the week, and we will make sure that you are all up to date on everything that you need to know. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.